Microsoft believes that tablets can be used to get real work done. So does Apple. Now Google is trying to convince us with the Pixel Slate, the first tablet it has made in 3 years. Much like the iPad Pro and the Surface Pro, the Pixel Slate is not a tablet simply meant for watching movies. It's surprisingly thin and light, the industrial design is top-notch, and Google built a handful of accessories to make the device more versatile. Yes, the Pixel Slate has very capable hardware, but that's only half the equation. The other half is Chrome OS and Android, which power the Pixel Slate, and that's what will make or break the vision that Google is selling. Before getting into the software, I have to give Google kudos for building an excellent piece of hardware. The Pixel Slate is dominated by its 12.3-inch display, the same size as Microsoft's Surface Pro and just slightly smaller than the 12.9-inch iPad Pro. It's extremely bright and pixel dense. Its 3000 by 2000 resolution is higher than either Apple or Microsoft's tablets. Between the display and powerful front-firing speakers, the Pixel Slate is great for Netflix binges. Looking past the screen, the Pixel Slate is Spartan and minimal. The dark blue-gray color scheme is understated but tasteful, and besides a subtle Google logo, the power button, the camera, and a pair of USB-C ports, there's really nothing to see here. It's all about the screen, and that's just fine with me. Google is selling a $199 Pixel Slate keyboard alongside its tablet, an admission that most people still need keys to get things done. It's a folio that wraps around the device and lets you prop it up at basically any angle you choose. Despite the somewhat odd circular keys, I had no trouble typing. Everything is well spaced and the keys are large. That said, the experience definitely suffers on your lap instead of a desk. The thin keyboard flexes easily, and you can actually activate a click on the trackpad if you rest your hands on it with too much pressure. That's pretty disappointing for $200. Google's $99 Pixelbook pen also works with the Pixel Slate, but it hasn't learned any new tricks in the last year. With some drawing and note-taking apps, latency is impressively low, but in others, it's a laggy mess. Even Google's own Keep app is still quite slow. Overall, Apple's iPad Pro is probably a better bet for artists. Even the $329 base-level iPad works well with the Apple Pencil and costs significantly less than Google's tablet. Despite a few hiccups with the keyboard and pen, the overall hardware package here is compelling, if expensive. The Pixel Slate I tested cost $999 with an Intel Y series Core i5 processor, 8GB of RAM, and 128 gigs of storage. Adding in the keyboard and pen takes this package to a whopping $1,300. For that kind of cash, the Pixel Slate needs to deliver a flawless experience across the board. But unfortunately, the software side of things is a letdown. First though, some good news. Using the Pixel Slate with the keyboard folio is a pretty solid experience. In this mode, Chrome OS works just like any other Chromebook, and that's a very good thing. Unlike the iPad, which is stuck with a mobile version of Safari, the Pixel Slate runs the full desktop version of Chrome, whether you're in tablet mode or using the keyboard. With the keyboard attached, it can handle most of my daily needs. I still use a Mac for heavy photo editing, but otherwise Chrome and various web apps like Todoist, Keep, Google Play Music, TweetDeck, and Slack all just work fine. However, a big part of Google's selling point for the Pixel Slate is its ability to run Android apps. It's been over 2 years since Google first announced this feature, and while it can come in handy, the overall experience is still confusing and frustrating. There are two main issues with Android on Chrome OS. The first is that the vast majority of Android apps simply are not built with big screens in mind. This has been an issue for years now, and very little has changed. Some apps like Spotify and Todoist can adjust their layout depending on whether you're running them full screen or in smaller windows, but too many are just stretched out phone apps. They don't look good at all. Some don't even work. Google has talked up Instagram on its Chromebooks since releasing the Pixelbook last year, but the app just looks ridiculous in full screen mode. And whether you're in full screen or a smaller window, captions for posts are cut off after a handful of words. Sure, you could theoretically post images to Instagram or browse your feed using this app, but it's definitely not worth the hassle. The other big problem is figuring out whether to use an app or a website, because each has its own drawbacks. Take Google Photos, for example. The website has a scroller on the right, so you can quickly navigate through years of your photos. But it doesn't work with touch. So if you're using the Pixel Slate as a tablet, the Google Photos app for Android actually works a lot better. That's just one example, but overall there's a lot of conflict between what works when using Chrome OS in its traditional desktop form and what's best when using it as a tablet. I've mostly just settled into using the device in desktop mode with the keyboard, only using Android apps like Adobe's Lightroom if I really need to. When I do use it as a tablet, I mostly just browse the web, play games, or watch movies. Android-based games and video apps mostly work fine, but not all games are optimized for Chrome or the Slate's x86 architecture. Alta's Odyssey, for example, runs far smoother on a Pixel 3 or any recent iOS device than it does here. But Google recommended games like Asphalt 9 and Don't Starve are smooth and look great on the Slate screen. Combining these issues with the Pixel Slate's high price tag ultimately makes this a very tough sell. The Slate starts at $599, but that's with a painfully slow Celeron processor, 4 gigs of RAM, and only 32 gigs of storage. The $799 option steps up to Intel's Core M3 processor with 8 gigabytes of RAM and 64 gigs of storage. But even though having the full Chrome browser on a tablet is a big deal, I'd rather spend that cash on Apple's 11-inch iPad Pro. iOS does have limitations compared to desktop operating systems like Windows, but it works splendidly on tablets. If you do find iOS too limiting and prefer Google's Chrome OS, last year's Pixelbook is probably a better way to spend your cash. Yeah, it's a year old, and the bezels around the screen are a bummer, but it's lighter and thinner than the Pixel Slate when paired with its keyboard, and it offers a better typing experience. The conflict between Chrome and Android is still present on that device, but as a pure laptop, it's still the better option, and it's significantly cheaper than a Pixel Slate that has similar specs. I love tablets, and I love Chrome OS, and I was hoping to love the Pixel Slate. Part of me does. When I sit down and use it as a laptop, it's one of the best Chrome OS experiences I've had. The screen is fantastic, performance is snappy, and it's a thin, light, and attractive package. Unfortunately, the combination of a very high price point and too many software bugs will ultimately keep this a niche device. Google has never quite executed on its vision for tablets, and that's again the case with the Pixel Slate.